Every journey begins in the mind. A flight of imagination. A vision of what might lie across the universe. Or within the deepest regions of the subconscious. Dr. Edward Pretorius is about to embark on such a journey.
It's out of control. You've got to turn it off.
Something's coming.
Humans are such easy prey.
From the makers of Reanimator, from beyond.
This is called the From Beyond reunion panel here, but I mean, you guys have all worked together in various stages through several different projects, so we're just going to kind of make it a free-form love fest for Stuart, Carolyn, and Barbara. So, but let's go ahead and start off with, to get to From Beyond, we have to start with Reanimator. So how did you guys meet for Reanimator and then decide to go on to From Beyond from there?
I'm going to let Barbara answer this question.
That's a lot. Well, I don't know. I just came in for an audition.
So Stuart was not familiar with your work prior to Reanimator?
No, I have done a soap opera. I think I did Days of Our Lives, and I had done one movie, Fraternity Vacation. And I think it was Anthony Barnea was the casting director, and he just called me in. And apparently, I didn't know this, but they had cast a different girl to play my role. And things didn't work out after she took a good look at the script, and her mother took a good look at the script. So they decided they had to have another audition. And so at that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, were Bruce and Jeffrey cast, and so I came in to read with them, and I didn't know that. I thought they were also being read to either cast or cast or not to audition. And so I was like, oh, they keep pairing me up with these guys. Okay, we must be doing well together then. Maybe we'll all get the parts. But little did I know, it was just me that they were looking at. I didn't know that. But anyway, we seemed to get along well, and they kept putting me back in the room, and that was that. And I got the role, and I was really excited. And then we sometimes tell this story, since Stuart is a theater director, and was a theater director, he really wanted to rehearse before the movie. We were all excited about that, and I happened to have a big living room at the time, so we rehearsed in my living room. And we rehearsed every single scene multiple times, and I think that really helped because the shooting schedule was, 19 or 21 days, something like that. 18 days, so we kind of had to hurry ourselves along, and I think it was really, really helped a lot that we had that rehearsal beforehand. And then you go. Oh.
Nobody wants to hear me. Well, everyone always wants to ask me about the scene.
What scene is that?
That was the reason that the other actress had dropped out, was that she just really got cold feet, and was worried about getting cold everything else, I guess. And Barbara approached it very differently than any of the other actresses that I talked to about it. She said, well, how are you going to shoot this? How's the scene going to be shot? And I showed her the storyboards for it. And she said, that's good. I don't think this one's going to work out well. And we got into very specific discussions about how long the scene would last, how long she would be on camera. And I think we got down to just a few seconds.
You told a story recently, and you said it was 7 seconds, but it wasn't 7 seconds. It was 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
And if you actually watched the
just
movie,
about
it's 3
7
seconds.
No, it was
I felt more comfortable with that.
And when we were shooting the scene, we'd agreed, the contract was twice as long as anyone else's contract because it went into great detail about how the scene was going to be shot and what we were going to be seeing and how long this was going to be on camera or how long it was going to be on screen. And when we started shooting the scene, Barbara started counting while we were shooting it. She said, 1,000, 2, and I said, Barbara, it's when the footage is cut, that's when the 3 seconds kick in.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that's right.
But the thing that I came away from, you know, and the reason that I love working with Barbara is that she is totally fearless. And working on Reanimator really proved that, you know, and I think that what she once said to me was, she said, no guts, no glory. And I think that's really true. And it's the reason I like working with Carolyn as well, is that she's totally fearless and will try crazy-ass things. And
For 5 seconds.
Yeah.
so, yes, I love both of these women.
So then from there, after you had, you know, this great relationship on Reanimator, was From Beyond already kind of in the works in your head? I mean, was that part of the deal, of the 3-picture deal
Well,
already?
actually, the film that I thought we were going to do after Reanimator, the one I wanted to do, was Dagon, which didn't get made for 15 years, actually, because when we told Charlie Van, you know, our producer, that it was about people turning into fish, he just laughed and said, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And he suggested that we do a different story, and I think that's when it became From Beyond.
Okay, so that's when, and you started working on that with
Dennis Paola.
Dennis, right?
Yes.
And did you have Barbara and Jeffrey already in mind?
Well, I really wanted, yes, I wanted to keep the group together. And, you know, coming from theater, I'm used to working with an ensemble of actors, and they were so wonderful to work with. And I thought it would be great to keep it going. And one of the ideas we had in From Beyond was that they should switch roles. That Barbara would be the bad scientist, and that Jeffrey would be the victim. You know, that he would be the one that was, you know, counting off the seconds.
Were you excited by that prospect, Barbara?
Well, yeah, I mean, most people remember Reanimator as, you know, Stuart's being tour de force picture, and they love that movie, and of course it's so popular and so phenomenally good. And I love that movie, but for me, the character of Catherine in From Beyond was really my favorite role. I mean, I got a chance to play so many different aspects of her character and go through so many different machinations in a period of, you know, a 2-hour movie. It was just an incredible role, and I was just so thankful that he wanted me to play that part.
Well, it was interesting because one of the things about the character was that she's supposed to be a psychiatrist and a famous psychiatrist. And Barbara was, you know, the question was, you know, she seemed awfully young to be playing this role. And so we worked in a lot of stuff, and I think Carolyn ended up delivering a lot of lines where she keeps referring to her as the girl wonder. You know, the idea that this is a real sort of hotshot, young psychiatrist with a lot of radical ideas.
Yeah, and I tried to keep my voice low, and I, you know, put my hair back and tried to make me look sort of proper.
For the first reel.
Yeah. Exactly, yes. Yeah.
Can we talk, Carolyn? Can we talk about both Reanimator and then going into From Beyond?
Sure.
Because first off, Stuart, did you immediately know that she was going to play those 2 roles? Did you write them, you know, with her in mind?
For Carolyn?
Yes.
In a sense, yes, because it's sort of a family joke that when I met Carolyn, she was going to be a nursing student. And so you know, her maiden name is Purdy, so I always call her Nurse Purdy. So the idea of having her, you know, play a medical character was kind of sort of an inside joke.
I was a nursing student when I met Stuart, and my dad is a doctor, and I worked in hospitals most of my teenage years and when I first started college. I was real comfortable playing medical parts. It was like second nature. This sort of thing didn't usually go on in hospitals.
No, not as much with the pineal glands being hacked off.
Snaking out of people's foreheads, none of that. But yeah, I was okay with that. I was in my comfort zone.
I just watched Dolls again this past week, and I mean, I'd say that, you know, between Reanimator and From Beyond and then Dolls, you have the kind of the corner on the grumpy
I give good bitch.
Yes.
On screen and off. It's funny, my daughters had no problem believing me as the mean stepmother in Dolls.
How many people have seen Dolls? Yeah, great film.
I had a good time making it. It was a lot of fun. It's one of my favorites.
I guess, well, the next, the Dolls came next, right? Wasn't that the next one?
Dolls came after.
Right after From Beyond, right?
It was shot before From Beyond.
Oh, it was shot before.
It was released after From Beyond. They were shot back to back.
On the same sets. Yeah, we shot both movies in what's called Dino's Città, which is a studio Dino De Laurentiis built on the outskirts of Rome. And in kind of Roger Corman style, we did them both on the same sets. We had the sets we painted and redressed, but they were pretty much
From Beyond and Dolls.
Dolls, yeah.
Wow.
Dolls was shot first. And the reason Dolls was released later was because it had all of this stop motion effects stuff
That
that
they
took
found,
a long time.
So, can we talk a little bit about, because Ken Foray is a big star in this crowd. Can we talk a little bit about working with him?
Yeah, Ken was wonderful. I mean, Ken also is a fearless actor. And we had a great time working together on this movie. One of the things that we did in preparation was we did a lot of research about the pineal gland, which is what the movie's about. The thing about the story, Lovecraft wrote the story in 1922, and it's sort of amazing to me because nothing, even now, we know so little about the pineal gland. It's an organ in the center of your brain, which is sensitive to light, which always is sort of amazing to me because how does light get through your skull into the center of your brain? But the pineal gland, we found out, is what, it has a lot to do with your moods. It has a lot to do with sexuality, and as we say in the movie, people through time have wondered about, some people have even called it the third eye, saying that it's a sensory organ, which, and that's what Lovecraft was kind of inspired by when he did his story. The idea that man is very limited in his, how he perceives the world. The five senses are very, very limited. And that, he was talking about how eyes can only see a very limited range of, light waves, and that there's so much more ultraviolet rays and all these other things that we're not aware of. And the idea was that the pineal gland could be the magical third eye, allowing us to see all these things that are normally invisible to us. It's a great, idea. One that they're still kind of exploring because they still don't know exactly what the pineal gland does. Although we did find out that it has to do with jet lag too. That it's sort of the body's timer, and that's the reason that it's light sensitive. And that if you've got jet lag, one of the ways to sort of get over it is to walk around in the sunshine, which is a kind of really interesting thing. But it also has to do with creating sexual, and that's one of the ideas. It's not in Lovecraft's story that we sort of mind that idea a lot from the other.
I just thought he was, in real life, maybe you can get a sense of it from watching him on screen. He's just full of life, and he's kind of goofy and fun and funny and very engaging, and he's a big man, and his energy is very big, and he's very kind, and I just had a really fun time working with him. He's just likes to joke around a lot. It's never a dull moment with him. I thought it was just great. Just enjoyed it so much.
His character is kind of like the everyman. I think one of the things with Lovecraft that I found is that his characters are also strange, but you need to create a character who is sort of like an audience surrogate, somebody that the audience can relate to. In Reanimator it was Dan Kane, the roommate, and in From Beyond it's the character that Ken Foray plays, who's this cop who finds himself in the middle of this insane story.
That makes a lot of sense too, because Lovecraft is so atmospheric, and in the movies that you've created from the stories, it's much more buttoned down. We have a sense of the story. The characters are really important, and what they do impacts the story in such a way, and to have a character like that, having you say that makes a lot of sense, to kind of pull it all together.
I have a Ken Furry story.
I want to hear your camera.
I told this story earlier today to somebody. If you're in this room, I apologize to that guy, because you're going to have to sit through it again. There was a scene in the movie in From Beyond where Ken Foray is supposed to sit down and eat a plate of dumplings. And the dumplings, because they're having all of these subliminal sexual thoughts due to the pineal gland and so on, the dumplings were supposed to look like two luscious female breasts. So we asked the cook out at the cantina at Dino Città about making some dumplings. And the Italians don't have this kind of dumpling. Their dumplings are little sort of button-sized gnocchi, which are potato dumplings. It's a whole different thing. So Stuart said to me, could you make up these dumplings? Make them look like breasts. Sure, get me some Bisquick. They fly Bisquick over from LA to Rome, because you can't get it in Italy. I go out to the studio canteen where there is an Italian cook who's watching my every move in his kitchen. I make up the dumplings carefully using chicken broth as the liquid to cook them in. They come out beautiful, lovely rounded mounds of dumplings. I put them on the plate, and this guy's over my shoulder every second. And I go, look, Tommy, this is what they're supposed to look like here. And he goes, Aspetta, wait a minute. And before I can stop him, he ladles out a huge dipper of red sauce and pours it over them. And I had to start over again. So it was bloody breasts for a minute there. But you know, for a Stuart Gordon movie, it could have been good. But it wasn't what was needed. And I finally made the second round of breasts, and I go, or dumplings, and I say, Tommy, don't touch, please, don't touch. Take them over to the sound stage, and I give them to Ken, and I go, here you go. He goes, thanks a lot. Does the scene, makes it look like this is the most delicious, sensual experience he's ever had. And when it's all over, he goes, I got to tell you, I hate dumplings. Thanks, Ken.
We'll go ahead and open it up for some questions about From Beyond, and then we'll go ahead and talk about other films that they've done. So any From Beyond questions? Yes, Craig.
Since Lovecraft doesn't really have female characters in his stories, did Carolyn or Barbara have any input in the kinds of characters that they were playing in the film, or how did you develop the characters for them?
You know, Stuart has a very strong point of view when he's directing, and I think if he could play any of the characters himself, he would. And so we had a great collaboration with him. I mean, he was just, really, and I think this comes from his theatrical background, he's just really mindful of what every character is doing in the movie, and, talking to each actor at length about, the scene and the story and the impact of what's happening in the scene. And really it was from his direction that, we have our movies.
Carolyn, do you want to speak to that?
It's my recollection is that the script that he handed me was sort of what we dealt with. I don't remember having a lot of input. You? I played the lines that he gave me to play, and I enjoyed it. I had no beef with it.
You had some pretty tricky lines, too.
No, I don't think so. What?
Like my favorite being,
Crawford, please don't eat those. That's a good line, but it's in the context of the movie. I don't think by itself it was terribly meaningful.
I mean, did you and Dennis have any problem, working it around so that you were including these female characters?
well, no, actually, it seemed to make sense, and also the other thing is that one of the things you have to get into, and it's the same thing with True Reanimator, is that the mad scientist has to have this dream, that there's some reason, good reason why they're doing what they're doing. In Reanimator, it's the idea of bringing the dead back to life. If you were able to do that, you win the Nobel Prize in a second. That would be like the greatest medical achievement ever. And in From Beyond, what we got into was the idea that maybe this, the enlarged pineal gland is what causes schizophrenia, and that Barbara's character her father had been a schizophrenic who had died in a mental hospital, and that this was the reason why she was, exploring this, why this was so important to her. So it was a very personal reason. I think, the thing that Lovecraft, he doesn't give you female characters, it's very true, but he oftentimes doesn't give you doesn't give you enough information about the characters. So coming up with backstories is sort of one of the things that was important when we were working on this.
And I'm not sure everybody does that in movies. I mean, I think you and Dennis really researched that stuff very well. I mean, you gave us a lot of great material, and again, because you come from the theater, the backstory is important. And I didn't have to do a lot of my own research. I mean,
But I remember you did.
I did some.
And then you talked to psychiatrists and researchers who were doing work about pineal gland.
Yeah.
Remember that book, The Broken Brain?
Mhm.
You were all about that?
Yeah, right.
Any other from beyond? Yes.
In the film, when the machine is turned on, all the scenes are done in that very peculiar pink lighting. I wonder, is that lighting that was done on set or something that was done in post-production? And if it was done on set, was it at all that scheme difficult to work with?
No, it was all done on stage. It was all done on, and it was Mac Alberg who was the DP, a great, just a great DP. And also did Reanimator and several of my other films. Created this whole thing. The idea of why it was purple was because of what Lovecraft was saying about ultraviolet light. That it's beyond our spectrum of being able to see it. And he talks about the purple light in the story. He actually mentions it. And what we wanted was to give this sort of ripple effect, kind of and Mac created that with sheets of reflective mylar that he could bend so that there'd be these weird kind of reflections of people's faces. I mean, it was very elaborate. And also he did a thing with wind, blowing wind through it. It's funny, I was talking to a scientist who saw the movie once, and he was saying, in our movie we have these giant tuning forks that are vibrating to create this frequency, and he said, wouldn't it have made more sense for the frequency to be created by light, since that's really what you're dealing with here? I said, I guess, yeah, it's a duh.
Now you tell me.
Yeah.
You're next. Yes, sir.
Stuart, you talked about your actors, Barbara being fearless, and From Beyond, you're wearing kind of leather, lingerie kind of stuff. Was there a process where you had to get fitted for that, or did you go find that, or what?
Very intimate question.
She always looks that good.
Usually with wardrobe, what they'll do is they'll go out and buy things, and then they'll come to you and you'll try them on. So I don't really remember anything specific more than that, or them like fitting it for me, and maybe they do have to make adjustments. But
I can't believe you don't remember this, but one of my favorite days working on From Beyond, Barbara and I went to the Pleasure Chest Museum, which is like a sex.
Never took me to the Pleasure Chest.
Well, I wonder where I'd sleep. Anyway, it was great. It was like, Barbara, try this on. Barbara, try this on. Try that on. And we went through several different things. And so finally, one of the guys at the Pleasure Chest said, I think what you're trying to do is create some sort of leather outfit. It's going to have to be made for Barbara.
really, I
You don't remember this? You blocked this out.
Are you sure you're not making this up? Because I remember.
And then he woke up.
I thought I went with you to the Pleasure Chest, and we worked on the costume together at the Pleasure Chest. Okay, I remember sort of being there, and then somebody handed me an outfit.
And then he offered you a drink.
I woke up dazed and confused. Other outfit. Really? Okay, I'll believe you.
A good time was had by all.
I do.
There are no other questions about From Beyond. We'll just kind of open it up to the careers of these three individuals, which are pretty wonderful. I'd like to talk to you guys just about kind of your feelings about horror movies in general. I mean, Stuart, you've kind of become categorized as a horror director, but you've done so much, and you have so much comedy in your films inherently, and I know you come from the theater background, so you guys were doing all sorts of stuff. So how is it that you came to be doing as many horror films as you ended up doing?
Well, first of all, I've always loved horror movies. When I was a kid, I was not allowed to see them, and I think that made them really super special. They were forbidden fruit in a way. And they always end up being funny, which is one of the reasons that I think that is that you never have an audience that wants to laugh more than a horror movie audience. It's like, and the reason is that laughter is the antidote to fear. When you laugh, you're no longer afraid. And I always think it's a good idea to give the audience something that they can laugh at without destroying the movie. So that's part of it. But in Hollywood you get typecast. Whenever you are successful, they want you to do more of those things. And I became a horror movie director because of the success of the end.
Sure, but you managed to keep stretching and finding opportunities to...
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the areas that we sort of got into, and From Beyond really sort of was the beginning of this, is the idea of sexual horror. The idea of sex being something horrific, which I think is something that comes from Lovecraft himself. Lovecraft has all of these bizarre sex acts in his stories. People having sex with fish and gorillas and all these creatures from other dimensions and so forth. And so it's a sort of sex is a fearful thing. And it was interesting, about a year ago I was at a film festival where I met the guys who made a Serbian film. And one of them came up to me and said, "Stuart, you must see this movie. You inspired it." It was like,
You guys seen this movie?
Yeah.
It's very upsetting.
This movie is a sexual horror film, is really what it is. And that's what I think what the guy was saying, what he meant, because that's an area that, in most movies, it's interesting, most horror movies, you look at things like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it's not about sex, it's about, these guys are cannibals, and they're going to kill you and eat you. I met an old friend of mine, is Dan O'Bannon, who did Alien, and one of the things that he said, I always thought it would be interesting if the villains didn't want to kill you, but they wanted to have sex with you. And that is that's what the basis of Alien is about, which is the idea that the alien creature wants to use humans as part of the reproductive cycle, of this thing. And that's what makes that movie so, just so horrific. So that's, one of the things I like to explore. One of the things I try to do with horror movies is to find those things that upset people that hasn't been done before, or something to try to get into something new.
Barbara, what's your experience with horror in general? I mean, like, what's your
Well, it all started with Stuart, obviously, and then he kept hiring me, and I did a few other ones, and I also have had a long career in soap operas. I've done 4 different soap operas for about 12 years. And so I guess that's my legacy, is horror movies and soap operas, which kind of don't really go together.
What's your attitude toward horror as a genre?
Well, when I was younger, I watched The Twilight Zone and The Outer Limits, and Dark Shadows was my favorite show. And so I couldn't say to you that when I did Reanimator, I was a horror fan, but then after that, I became a horror fan. I started watching more horror movies and still continue to watch them now, and have become, more knowledgeable about all the different directors and all the different movies that we've all seen. And then I took a break for a while. I hadn't really been working very much in the past 10 years or so. I live in San Francisco now, and I have 2 young children, 8 and 10. And I just came back to the genre this past year. I was in 2 different movies that are supposed to come out before the end of the year. You're Next.
Adam Rifkin's film.
Adam Wingard?
Wingard, sorry.
Yeah. They did a movie called A Horrible Way to Die, which I think Stuart saw before. And Lionsgate bought it, and so it's coming out probably in October. And then I have parts of Lords of Salem, too.
Rob Zombie's new film, Lords of Salem.
So, and I'm waiting for Stuart to cast me in his next movie.
And Carolyn, your attitude toward horror?
I'm like Stuart, I was not allowed to see the horror movies when I was a kid. I'm from a small town in Wisconsin, and they rarely played in Janesville, and when they did, I was not allowed to go. I was not allowed to see very many movies, period, but certainly not horror movies. And then I met Stuart in college, and he opened up a whole new world. And we started with the classics. He took me to see Frankenstein and Dracula and the originals, I mean. And then we went from there to the Hammer movies and the Roger Corman movies. And I really, and also all the Vincent Price movies. God, those were great. And I have become a fan of horror movies. And I suppose that I don't think I have a legacy, but the body of my film work is wrapped up in horror, and I like it that way.
Well, it's certainly wrapped up with Stuart. I mean, I guess that's another question. It seems like you guys work.
Story of my life.
You guys have done 9 projects together, 9 or 10. I mean, on film. But I mean, it doesn't seem like you are you out looking for more work? I'm just. It's an embarrassing question to ask an actor, but I mean, just
all actors are looking for work all the time, and I'm not as aggressive about it as I could be. But yes. Sure, and I've done a few things for other directors as well, but yes, mainly I work for Stuart.
Because you're amazing. You're wonderful. She's a wonderful character. I don't know why.
Anyway.
So just kind of questions in general now. Yes, sir.
I've got a question for Stuart. When I met Barbara earlier today, I commented that you've always struck me as David Cronenberg with a sense of humor. Were you influenced by Cronenberg at all in his body horror ideas?
Oh yeah, Cronenberg freaks me out.
Head between the knees.
Once we went to a drive-in movie to see his film, It Came From Within, which I think is sometimes called Shivers. And I got so freaked out in the middle of that movie, I said, we got to get out of here. And we're in a drive-in theater, and when I was so freaked out, we drove off and ripped the little radio off the windshield, and we're going up and down those little hills. And like, let's get out of here! So, Cronenberg he flips me out every single time. Dead Ringers, oh my God.
And he deals with a lot of sexual stuff too. I didn't
Yes.
know if that influenced you, but like Rabbit and Videodrome.
Oh yeah, no, he's into
They're
that.
hard to watch.
They are. Yes, very.
Yeah.
That's why I like the humorous nature of your movies. They're a little easier to tolerate.
Yeah, well, Cronenberg's got a sense of humor too, but it's a little more
It's dark.
dry. It's kind of,
Very
I mean, in Dead Ringers, he puts all of his surgical guys in red, which I've never seen in any hospital. That's like insane. But it really works in that movie.
Yes, sir.
I just had a question for Stuart. I know you worked with David Mamet at the theater and stuff, and you mentioned sexual horror, and it seems like in your films and in his stuff, there is kind of like one push the audience here just specifically through sexuality. And I'm just wondering if he ever saw Reanimator from Beyond, and if he did, what did he think of it?
Well, I think you must have seen it, because when we were working, we did Edmund together,
Yeah.
and he said, and there's a scene in it where William H. Macy's character kills Julia Stiles, and he came over to me and said, "You should cut off her head."
How do you feel about practical effects these days?
About what?
Practical effects, as opposed to CGI.
I think they're the best. I think if you can do it, I think that's the first thing that you should try to do, is to figure out a way to actually do it, and so that the actors can interact with what's going on, so that they're there playing it. I think So a lot of these movies that are all CGI, I think are lazy movies.
I think they're lacking a lot.
You know, I think that what they're doing is they're saying, all right, we'll just do it in post. And, you know, the best movies are where you use all of the tools, you know, where you use practical effects and animatronics and you know, CGI when you can't do it any other way. I kind of think is the way to do it.
I have a two-part question. One is what your opinion is of Lovecraft. I mean, I think he was ahead of his time as far as a horror writer and a writer in general. He's brilliant, but just your opinion. And also what you feel like about remakes, and if a possibility of like From Beyond or Reanimator ever came up, how you would feel about that.
Well, you know, to answer your second question first, I think that it's only a matter of time before they're going to do a remake of Reanimator, probably. You know, but I think, you know, I have to say I'm not big on any of the remakes.
Right.
Because I feel that the people who are making them have not invested themselves in those movies. They're doing
it's
you know,
classic and it's timeless. And
well, it's you know, I mean, you can make a million versions of Dracula. You know, this is a story that's been done over and over again, or Frankenstein, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like when they do these remakes of, you know, The Hills Have Eyes, or something, it's like or Texas Chainsaw. It's the people who are making them would never have made this movie unless it was, you know, a studio project that had made money. It's really a commercial thing is really what it's about. So I'm not big on those. I mean, occasionally you have somebody like David Cronenberg who does a remake of The Fly, which is spectacular because he's going in completely different directions than the original movie did. And then I think it's exciting if a remake kind of goes, you know, brings something new to the project. To get to your first question about Lovecraft, I think Lovecraft was way ahead of his time. And it's funny because one of the things I run into all the time are these Lovecraft purists who are upset with me because I don't do the movies in period. I don't do them in setting. I don't set them in the 1920s or 1930s when Lovecraft lived. And my feeling is that there's no reason to do that. It's not like Lovecraft's ideas are dated, that his ideas need to be set in the past, and that by doing that you're basically sort of making them, they're not as immediate. They're you know, they don't have the power. You know, we haven't caught up with Lovecraft yet. You know, his ideas are so you know, out there. And the thing about Lovecraft that I discovered working on his stories is that Lovecraft didn't believe in the supernatural. Lovecraft, all of his stories have a scientific basis, and he would research the science really carefully. For him to have known anything about the pineal gland is incredible because it's, like I said, we don't really know much about it now. You know, in Reanimator, he almost gives you the formula for how to reanimate the dead. You know, it's you know, this is a science fiction writer. It's what Lovecraft is, in my opinion.